We are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us. Michael Curcio is with us, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. Busy guy right now, dealing with a lot of stuff at the state capitol. And you look, the last caller, and you can jump in if you'd like. We're talking about the Community Oversight Board. Also, the last caller, all this stuff's connected about crime. Yep. You saw what happened in downtown Nashville this past weekend. You know, we've heard from police chiefs. I did a story the other day about a sheriff's department deputy who saved a guy's life, pulled him from a burning car. Wow. That guy makes $12 an hour as a sheriff's deputy. Okay, I know people washing dishes downtown making more than that. All right, there's something wrong. And I don't know what the state can do with regard to this. These are county salaries. Small counties don't have a lot of money. The police chief here in Metro would like to have more officers. What do you see, and what can the state do, you know, from where you sit in judiciary to address this crime issue that seems to be escalating, especially in a city like Nashville, which is becoming major metropolitan? You know, I think there's certainly several approaches we could take. One, though, is sort of a non-governmental angle. Today, and it will be visited, the General Assembly will be visited this week by 4-H'ers from all across the state. We were visited a few weeks ago from the FFA, the Future Farmers of America. Yeah, 4-H'ers right. That's right, I got my 4-H'ers representing today, so hopefully they're watching. but continuing to instill in our young people and in each generation that comes up a respect for authority and confidence in our institutions. Now, those institutions have to earn that trust. We have to make sure that they are accountable to the people, to make sure that they give folks a fair shake when they come before them. But really taking that extra time to make sure that the next generation coming up understands that we've got respect for authority, we've got respect for law enforcement, we've got respect for one another, and some of that we've lost, I think. And I'm not one of these crotchety, old timers saying kids these days. I mean, here I'm one of the younger members of the General Assembly. But the point is, to make sure that we continue to build that trust year over year. After the vote on Thursday on the Community Oversight Board legislation, I had members of Metro officers who were in my office waiting for me outside the chamber saying, thank you for at least speaking about the police in a positive light. Regardless of the outcome of the debate, thank you for letting folks know that we're here to serve them and that we care about our community and that we're civic minded. And like you said, the fellows who are pulling, men and women who are pulling people out of burning cars and so forth, making $12 an hour. I mean, these are public servants, and so they ought to be at least innocent until proven guilty, just like everybody else. Yeah, and you get a sense of that because I think part of it is obviously a lot of these Metro officers are supportive of your legislation, and officers in general probably on the COB. Look, the vast majority of law enforcement officers are good people and good at what they do, and they put their lives. I'm inclined to give them benefit of the doubt every time. Now, the COBs come about because of some unfortunate shooting incidents that have raised, and there's other issues, but those are really the things that sparked it here. And it's not fair to paint all officers with any one brush. That's wrong, and if that's happening, it shouldn't be. But do you think officers right now are taking an unfair beating? I think we're going through a really hard time right now as a society. Morale at departments down? It seems that way. I don't work there, so I mean, I don't want to use too heavy a hand there, but I have gotten several emails and calls. Again, I told you, in my community where I live out in Dixon, we have a lot of folks who actually commute in to work to Nashville in any profession, but including law enforcement. And so we have heard from a lot of folks who say, yeah, morale's not as good as it used to be, but that's true of law enforcement across the country. I have a brother who's in law enforcement. He's certainly seen that across the country. He's also served in the Marine Corps. He's a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps. And so there just seems to be this general distrust kind of sweeping the country. And again, I think that's a very, very dangerous precedent. We want to make sure, certainly my 3 children know to respect police officers and to make sure that we continue generation after generation to build those trust and the confidence in those institutions. And again, those institutions have to earn it. So it's not a blank check, but we want to make sure that we have a better dialogue and a better respect for one another. That's why I try very hard as an elected representative, for example, to be careful and aware about my own rhetoric, about how I engage with other folks, how I engage with folks from across the aisle. I try very, very hard to be extremely respectful of differing views, because as one of my political heroes, Howard Baker, used to say, the other guy might be right. And so we need to listen more than we talk in this business, and to make sure that all views are being heard. Yeah, I think with that perspective, I mean, you're right. In terms of the respect for law enforcement officers, and it should be there. Now, do you try to put yourself in the shoes of others maybe who say,
well, look, if they just don't run or if they cooperate with officers, everything will be fine. And most people would say that on its face makes sense. But can you understand why someone, maybe with a different skin color than yours, may not view an officer stopping them the same way you do if you get stopped?
I can certainly understand, especially if you've had a family history of you know,
based on personal experience,
brushes with the law, run-ins with the law. I no doubt that people perceive these interactions in different ways. I have no problem seeing that. But again, at the end of the day, we've got to make sure that that mutual respect exists. And again, not giving these institutions a blank check. They've got to earn that respect. But you know, that's one thing that we work on, you know, even at a very early age. You know, in my own household, you know, you get pulled over for a speeding ticket or something, you know, your hands are at 10 and 2. It's yes sir, no sir. You know, we want to make sure that, because in that moment, that officer is theirs taking a risk. They're standing on the side of a road. They have no idea what's going on inside that car. I am, as a citizen, I'm taking a risk. I've pulled over on the side of a busy road, and I'm speaking to an officer who is trying to figure out if I'm a risk to him in any way, him or her in any way. So that is a very tense situation on its face. We need to make sure that everybody involved in that interaction is respectful and moves in deliberate ways and speaks in deliberate ways. And that's something that, again, you've got to be taught that. That's something that as a society we've got to remember, that they're in a very stressful position. They're in a very stressful job. They've got colleagues that are being shot. They're on the front lines. You know, it's a war that we don't see because we don't work in that world. And so you could certainly understand if when they approach a vehicle, they're on guard. They need to be. That's their job. So
let's take a call from Tony, maybe on that very subject. Just rang us up. Tony, good morning to you, Tony.
Good morning, Nick. Good morning to this, Mr. Curcio. Let me say this, Nick. I don't understand why he's out of another county. He may be a representative, but he's out of another county I came from, and he's raised the most hell up from these, and backed by law enforcement, obviously. So it's a conflict of interest on his part if he is getting any funds or any lobbies from the Metro Police Department. So he should excuse himself from it. This is something the citizens of Davidson County voted on. It has nothing to do with Dixon County. It has nothing to do with state of affairs. It's a legitimate vote. We cast it up here on a referendum. So if you got a law like that and then he wants to conflict it, why would we even put it on a referendum? Why have him vote on it? He didn't decide to intercede before we done the vote.
All right. Again, that's a fair question. He's just saying, you know, your interest. Now, again, you can talk about how you're a state lawmaker and you're looking at as a whole, but you know, you don't live in Davidson County.
Right. So again, I'm 35 miles from the capital. Grew up in Middle Tennessee my entire life. Very much a part of this community. But I want to be very clear, and I want to make sure we're all dealing with the same set of facts. Is that nothing in this bill prohibits or overturns what Nashville did. So the local voice has spoken. That ballot referendum stands. Had you not taken that ballot referendum, you wouldn't have a community oversight board to begin with. And so all this bill does is create some standards and some guidelines. And so yes, it did bump into, in one very specific area, that subpoena power, but everything else about that stands. And in fact, in consultation with cities who have community oversight boards, we did take an amendment in committee, which we adopted. This made it to the bill, where we are trying to work with all sides and say, help us understand how these boards are functioning for you and what about our legislation might need to be altered. And so we took those suggestions that we could. That's why you'll see a 12-month grace period, so to speak, on the membership requirements of these boards. We did not want the Metro Council to have to go back through this process of reselecting folks to serve on these boards or anything of that nature. So we were able to take that constructive criticism and fold it into the bill. So again, nothing about what you voted on the ballot referendum, except for that one piece, the subpoena power, would change in any way, shape, or form. So kudos to you who voted for this board and you want it, and you've got your local voices spoken. And again, I want to be very, very clear, nothing in here would prohibit the Metro Community Oversight Board from going to the Metro Council and requesting a subpoena. That is something that they can absolutely do. And the other thing, and this was something that Johnny Garrett, who's a freshman representative, mentioned on the House floor on Thursday, is that In this charter amendment, there's one sentence that's 5 words long that describes how the Community Oversight Board's subpoena power would work. Instead, you look at the rules of practice that attorneys and lawyers who deal with subpoenas on a day-to-day basis have to follow. The book is 6 inches thick. And so there's just, it wasn't very well thought out. It sounded good at the time, and I understand the reasons for it, but there are professionals who can issue those subpoenas, and so the Community Oversight Board can focus on what they are intended to do, which is to provide guidance and oversight and a citizen voice. And again, as we talked about in the break, any recommendation that's made by this Community Oversight Board, I have no doubt that News Channel 5 and many others are going to cover those and talk about, hey, these are the recommendations that the board made. Why aren't you responding to this, Metro Council? Or why aren't you responding to this, Internal Affairs at Metro Police? And that is going to be an extremely transparent process.
And that's a good point. And you're absolutely right about that. And that's the role of the media there. That can. Real quick, before we go to our next break, I just want to hit you up on this because it caught my attention. We had another couple people ask about it. About the penalty for stealing a gun.
Yes.
All right, that's being looked at. So if you can, set it up for me again.
Okay.
As it stands now, if someone steals a gun, say out of a vehicle, maybe not a real fancy gun, but lethal nonetheless, $50, how does it play out?
Yeah, so right now under current law, it's treated as any other property theft. So the penalty is a percentage of the value of the object stolen. So think of a television or a car. Obviously a TV is going to be much lower valued than, say, a vehicle is. And so those penalties are different. They're based on a percentage of the value. Well, we are having a lot of guns stolen out of cars. And so one of the proposals that came forward would in a way re-victimize a victim already. They said, well, we ought to have a penalty. If somebody steals your gun, you were irresponsible, you didn't take proper precautions, obviously, because the gun was stolen. Well, no, somebody broke into my car and they took my gun. So what we did want to look at, though, is how can we put doubt in people's minds? How can we make them stop and think? So one of those proposals that's made it through the Judiciary Committee already would be a mandatory 30-day jail sentence for the theft of a firearm, regardless of the value of it. Because again, if I have a 30-year-old handgun that functions just fine, it may not be worth a lot of money, but it's still very, very lethal. So, so one of those proposals would be mandatory 30-day jail time for the theft of a gun, and another that came through committee last week would increase the financial penalty on that theft of a gun. So instead of it being a percentage of the value of the object, it's going to be based on the fact that you stole a gun, and that's where the financial penalty is going to come
so
in.
it would be an enhancement for stealing a gun.
Absolutely.
Which is treated differently. That necessarily have you think enhancements, like be it hate crimes or something that's an aggravated crime, and aggravation is an enhancement on a murder. This would be an enhancement for stealing, different than stealing a TV. That's right.
That's right. Because stealing a gun is different than stealing a golf bag. It just is, and so we got to treat it differently.
What's the chances of that passing?
Oh, it's the first proposal I talked about is part of a larger bill. It passed the sub and the full committee handedly, and the bill itself, by the way, because of some of the other aspects of it, saves some $12 or $13 million.
How so?
Well, the bill has a lot of other moving parts to it. It's just the mandatory jail time is one piece of it. So we knew that if we created mandatory jail time, it would have a fiscal note attached to that. So what we did was we layered in some other things that still fit within the same caption that would save some dollars. So in years past, when we were kind of in this lock them up and throw away the key mentality, the Judiciary Committee, the Criminal Justice Committee was the source of a lot of very expensive proposals, right? Because it costs a lot of money to lock people up. It costs a lot of money to house them and to feed them and so forth. And so we're in a very unique time period right now where we have got a focus. We've got a governor who barnstormed the state on criminal justice reform issues, where we want to say, you know what, we want to mete out more accurately who we're mad at versus who we're afraid of. Because for a lot of times we were just locking up people that we were mad at. And I'm mad at them too, right? Because I pay my taxes and I obey the law, and I want to make sure that people pay their punishment for their crimes. But 95% of the folks who are in our jails are getting out. And so who they are when they get out has as much to do with them, whether or not they want to participate in the program, as it does for the programming that we allow them to participate in. Because if we take a heroin addict or a criminal and we lock them up for 10 years, at the end of that 10-year period, we meet them at the Sally Port, we hand them their knife and their release money, they're just as much an addicted person, they're just as much a criminal now as they were the day they came in, if we've not done anything to improve their station.
I couldn't agree with you more. My friend, thank you for coming on. I appreciate you coming on and talking this morning, and we'll follow this through the process. But I do appreciate you taking your time out and bringing Doug with you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
He's a good man. All right, we'll see you soon. All right, take a break. When we come back, we're taking a break a bit early with him because we have a special guest just to wrap up the end of the show, something you might want to attend. It's interesting. We'll be right back. Thanks, guys.